prayers, readings, songs. It's good to be here. Good to see you. Still feels like a rare treat to get together and be with human beings. I was inspired last week by Jess's talk to read a good part of my talk this morning. I like to write my stuff out, so even when I don't choose to read it out, I often have written it out already, and then I go back home after. I thought, oh, my written version was so much better than what I said. And it's actually shorter too, so that's good. When I don't read it, I just wander places, in my mind, which is not always bad, but I know. Yeah, wandering. Not all who wander are lost, right? Second Advent. I'm not actually going to speak about peace a lot directly, but I'll sneak it in a little bit here and there. But last Sunday, at the early service, the Celtic service, Kendall made a reference to how both the liturgy, the regular liturgy that we always do, and then especially the practice of Advent, was hitting a chord of deep familiarity in him that felt really good. And hearing him share that made a particular impact on me. This has always become one of the things that I love about liturgy, this sense of trying to weave these words really deep into my spirit, into my heart, so that they become a really familiar set of words right at the core of my being, where they find and create a home. So phrases in that liturgy, like in the confession, how we turn away from God's presence and those who differ from us or threaten us, and remembering that. Or part of the affirmation that the goodness of God is at the heart of humanity, planted more deeply than all that is wrong. So phrases like these have become a part. When you hear those words, those of us who use them every week, they just feel so much like they're part of our being. They've made a place there. And then Advent. This is an annual time of both remembering, because there's all the memories of Advents that have gone before, or Christmases that have gone before, that are part of that experience, but it's also a time of waiting. So we're kind of joining together this reaching back and this reaching forward. When our kids were young, we would get out our Jessie tree, and so this was a big part of our family life at home. And you probably can't see it from there, but there's all these little felt symbols that we would use, and so every day through the Advent season, we would put on a new little felt symbol and tell a story. And one of the things that the Jessie tree does is it weaves together this whole long tradition of stories and makes them a part of one story, a part of things that hold together and become more meaningful that way. All leading toward the focal point where Jesus would touch our longing for something better, where the love of God and all the messiness of humanity would become one, where forgiveness and reconciliation become the foundation, and where love of neighbor and enemy become the guide for how we live our lives. And so the Jessie tree was a really special time for our family of doing that. And when we did it enough and they would get old enough, they said, we can't just tell the stories anymore. Let's act them out. So then they would start to act out the stories, and they were the directors, so they got very creative in how they did that. Precious. So, the question that started to rise is, does Advent still connect us with roots that are old and beautiful, that are woven into our family and culture? Or do we sometimes start to get worried that these roots have become severed? This is our kitchen. Over recent weeks, our household has been greeted by a regular visitor. The former owner of our house, now well into his 90s, has forgotten that he moved just around the corner a few minutes away. What he remembers is where he lived so many years of his life. And he remembers this chair by this window. We liked it that he had put a rocking chair there, and so we put one there too, partly because Becca loved to rock too when we were in the kitchen and Carol was cooking and stuff. So it's hard for him to believe that this is not his house. So he started coming by again. When one of these times we invited him to sit and rest in this chair and chat about old memories, I think that some of those old memories came to life, and it made it seem very attractive to be here, a little too attractive, to be honest. So now he comes more often. Unfortunately, he walks in the winter cold with just his slippers and no jacket and stuff like that. At least he does always seem to remember eventually the other place where he does live. But unfortunately, neither we nor anyone who cares about him can really figure out what to do about this situation, because all the people who know him and care for him are about as old and occasionally confused as he is. So if anyone has any great ideas, please come talk to me after the service.
Maybe he should just live with you.
Yeah, no, we've kind of gone through that. He offered. I mean, after a long visit, we actually had company over, and after a long visit, we said, "So we'll drive you home." He said, "Oh no, it's fine. I'll just stay in here and go up to my room when I'm ready." Sorry. But I had a long talk with his brother the other day, which was a wonderful little moment. But we didn't have ideas. But maybe because Kendall's words were still on my mind, this visit impressed upon me the deep reality of what we remember and how much those old memories get sewn into who we are. For our visitor, the many years that he spent in our house are more real and meaningful to him than his present reality. This question started to form in my mind. What happens when we have come to reject those deep memories that have been planted in us over the years of our childhood or youth or young adulthood? When we've thrown out the baby with the bathwater, what happens to that beautiful, maybe occasionally smelly baby that still lives in our mind? That's maybe an awkward metaphor, but that seemed like an important question to me. What happens if we cut off some of those roots? What happens to some of the values of those memories that we have? Dementia, which has become a little bit more of a regular part of my life. This is my mom. Dementia reminds us that those old thoughts and feelings and recollections remain very real. So my mom, who, by the way, I don't know if you've heard any of the updates I've given, but she continues to do relatively well in spite of the fact that she was given a 2-week prognosis several months ago. But she's still doing okay. Not so much in her mind, but her body's okay. That's her and her new nursing home residence. But her mind is very hard to predict. Occasionally she can connect with us, but sometimes reality is being at a wedding at the church that she went to in her teens, or sometimes it's what's going on the TV, and she can't separate that from what's going on outside of the TV. So it's hard to say. But what happens if what would happen to us if our reality was somewhere 20, 30, or 40 years ago or more? If that became real again, how would you be feeling about being in those old memories now? Would you feel warm about reconnecting with something that you'd lost, or horrified to occupy that space with its limitations and judgments and emotions that you had? If it's the latter, then I wonder what we're risking in not making peace with our own histories. If we're not making peace with our own histories, then what is it like if we start living in them again? That was the question that really got a hold of my mind. It may have been on some of our minds here because of this fellow. I don't know if you remember this talk a few months ago, but it was actually not part of the talk, but part of the interaction afterwards. I think he was responding to something that Brian had shared. And he asked us, could we agree to dignify our whole journey? And he even dared to say, I don't have to be embarrassed that I was a Baptist. Anyone think about that afterwards when he said that? Did it lead to any thoughts in anyone? What does it feel like the invitation is to? Dignifying our whole journey. Yeah, Peter?
You were saying that he should has to be embarrassed because he's a Baptist?
No, he was saying he doesn't have to be embarrassed.
I agree with him.
Yeah,
I agree with him.
yeah.
I do, yeah, I agree with him.
Sometimes there's pieces of our memories that we're embarrassed we're a part of the picture, but we still want to stay connected to the whole picture. We still want to dignify the whole journey. So I love that phrase that he shared. I think what Brad meant by dignifying, I wanted to give a little bit more time. Anyone else have a thought? What they think it means to listen to what he's inviting?
Well, I mean, what it means to me is the sense that it is a journey. The sense that there's no way that we would have arrived where we are without all of these learnings. The ups and the downs, the things that were good and the things that aren't so good.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a difference between dignifying and validating. You know, like, you know, if someone does something embarrassing, you know, you dignify them with, hey, it's okay. You know, we've all been there. You know, let's clean up this mess or whatever. And you don't have to say that, oh, that was the right thing to do.
Let's do it again.
No, exactly. But it is a way of making someone feel, reminding them that they are loved and that they are still who they are.
Right.
That there's something there that's still good, even though what just happened was maybe not ideal.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds lovely.
I'm not sure how much this pertains. Can you hear me all right?
A little.
Muffled? I'm muffled? Okay. I remember listening to a story about a whole bunch of people who went whitewater rafting down the Grand Canyon, and it wasn't the best season at all, and it was just like mud, and they were all over 45, 50 years old. And,
Really old.
quite a few of them. Anyway, the first day, you could tell who was who by denomination, because most of the denominations were over in the corner drinking the wine afterwards, and the Baptists were on the other side, not having any of it. And then within 3 days, there was only one table, and they were all sharing it. So I just thought that was kind of neat.
Thank you. So yeah, Shannon just shared a story of some.
Shani.
That's what I said.
Oh, you did.
Yeah, some old folks who went whitewater rafting, and how there's differences at the beginning, but when you spend time together, sometimes those differences go away. It's funny. We actually went on a very literal thing like that with Donnie and some others, and I had been working at a counseling center with some Baptists in Fredericton and connected them with some vineyardites who wanted to go canoeing and end up at Donnie's place, and they stayed completely separated the whole time. And there wasn't even any wine or alcohol involved, but what there was is all the vineyardites had their picnic lunch on the American side, and the Baptists felt like that was breaking the law. So they stayed on the Canadian side. So we looked across the river at each other and waved while we ate our lunches. Of course, it was breaking the law, but some of us didn't care quite as much. That was just a story that was completely fictional for those who were listening on this tape. That never But I think what Brad was meaning by dignifying our whole journey is the same as what I mean by making peace with our history and staying in a relationship to it. For instance, you may have heard me say before, I've shared it on a few occasions, that I have intentionally separated myself from being an evangelical since 2004 during the build-up to the invasion of Iraq. For me, the loud evangelical voices, the many loud evangelical voices crying out for cruel and unjust war was just intolerable and irreconcilable with being a follower of Christ. So I needed to separate myself from that movement, to draw a line and say, I'm no longer willing to see myself as a part of that same thing. But I had been a part of that same thing. It still was and is a part of me with what has shaped me to be who I am. So for a very large part of my life, evangelical thinking shaped me for both good and ill. Nothing is gained by my thinking that it can just get written out of my life. About 10 years after I made that decision, I would write a blog post, and it was called 5 Blessings and 5 Curses of an Evangelical Childhood. It turned out to be my second most read post, so I think a few others resonated with that concept. But what I need is to celebrate, to dignify, to hold all that was good and rich and beautiful about my evangelical or my Mennonite past. I need to honor those memories and how they affected me, the beautiful and the painful. I also need to own and grieve the harm to others and to myself that was caught up in that. And that can be hard work sometimes that we don't want to do. It can interfere with relationships, especially if we do it awkwardly or if we do it in messy reaction to things. But it can interfere with relationships even if we do it really well. But if we do that work, naming and addressing the harm, grieving what was lost and what was missed, course correcting, negotiating new boundaries, etc., then we can stay in relationship with all of who we've been. Then it can revisit those places and be strengthened and encouraged by all that was good in our memories. Then maybe if there should come a time when our mind is finding itself more at home in the past than in the present, maybe it will be a more whole and redeemed past that we experience. I was thinking about some examples in our sacred texts. So, for example, in Deuteronomy 6, that, by the way, that's a mezuzah that we have on the doors of our house, because our family, our home was a home owned by a Jewish family. In fact, our regular visitor is one of that family. And so they had mezuzahs on all the doors of the homes. And it connects with this idea from Deuteronomy 6. There's a beautiful passage on the need to remember. The need to do intentional things in order to remember well. Like liturgy, like the Advent, and like doing family activities like the Jesse tree. So this is referred to as the Shema. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but the Jewish prayer that's often said a few times a day. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Keep these words that I'm commanding you today in your heart. Recite them to your children and talk about them when you're at home and when you're away, when you lie down and when you rise. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Fix them as an emblem on your forehead, and write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Beautiful passage. And there's lots of different ways in which creatively, we've tried to do that over the years. But now here's the thing that gets messy. Deuteronomy 7. Deuteronomy 7 is all kinds of messy. It begins by encouraging merciless genocide, and it ends with smug superiority, purity, and exclusion. It's really a pretty horrid chapter, right after Deuteronomy 6. This is one piece of it. When the Lord your God brings you into the land that you're about to enter and occupy, and he clears away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations mightier and more numerous than you. And when the Lord your God gives them over to you and you defeat them, then you must utterly destroy them, make no covenant with them, and show them no mercy. So our inheritance in the Abrahamic tradition, the tradition that we share with among Jews, Christians, Muslims, includes the beauty of Deuteronomy 6 and the ugliness of Deuteronomy 7. So I don't want to write the significance of Deuteronomy 6 out of my life because I'm embarrassed to have once believed Deuteronomy 7. So today is Second Advent. How does the long-awaited Prince of Peace deal with this mixed history? How does one who's born in poverty, all the things that we heard last week from Jess about his mom and the way in which she was both connected with the tradition and subversive, how does this coming one see things and help us to connect and to imagine anew? says this, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished." Somehow the newness that enters the world through Jesus did not come out of thin air. It had roots, a tradition. Somehow those roots, even though they, like us, are a mixture of good and evil, have helped bring us to this place where we are ready for something more life-giving. We don't abolish or erase, but we do reinterpret. So this is how Jesus does it later, same chapter, same sermon. "You have heard it that it was said, 'You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous." So he stays connected to the things that were in the past, the things that had problems. But then he fulfills and reinterprets and takes them to a new place. So we need the roots, we need the encouragement, the memory, the grounding of being whole, of being connected with our past. But we also need to be clear and courageous and vocal and communal about how we do the reinterpreting work that we have to do. And I just wanted to end with this line again. If we're not making peace with our own histories, then what happens when we start living in them again? Thanks. Renata, please come
Great.
sing more for us.
Great word, thank you.
Sorry.
I have to be so tall, Walter. So these are two of our favorites. Yeah, we're gonna do, we'll do Silent Night and then the First Noel. First Noel is one of your favorites and Silent Night is just, I love it. And I also thought it would be a great choice for the week of peace, just because there's something, it doesn't just say sleep in heavenly peace. It also just is such a lovely, just floaty, slow, peaceful hymn. So anyway, we're gonna do Silent Night first.
Okay.
Yeah. All is bright. first Noel, the angel did say, was too certain for shepherds in fields as they lay, in fields where they lay keeping their sheep on a cold winter's night that was so deep. Noel, Noel, born is the King of Israel. They looking up and saw a star shining in the east. Beyond them far, and to the earth it gave a great light, and so it continued both day and night. I think that's all, folks.
Yeah. Wonderful. Have a wonderful week.